Hey, everybody, and welcome to another edition of NWSL Live here on Tuesday night, 5 p.m. Eastern. As always, here on Twitch with you on the NWSL official channel. And as you can see, it's Lori, Lindsey, and I today. Jordan couldn't be with us, we miss her, but see her again soon. So you're stuck with Lori and I. Lori, how you doing?
I'm great. It's always good to see you.
Good to see you. So excited about the show today. We've got Abby Erceg coming on in just a few minutes as our weekly guests this week. And just want to remind anybody as you're joining here in the chat, if you have any questions for us, we'll go over some scores and some games from a very busy week, including some midweek games last week in the NWSL, some news, obviously always some news to talk about. And we'll get to those games in a little bit more depth on the back end of the show here. And we'll just get you caught up at the beginning here so we can get to Abby Erceg quickly. So if you have anything for us about those games, please drop them in the chat. And probably more importantly, if you have anything to ask Abby, just shoot them our way in the chat and we will try to get those featured on air. So Lori, busy week. I know you've been buzzing around as always. You did, over a week ago already was WICC and all that, but some scores to go over here. I think first, we had the midweek game or midweek games, which I think the big one was Portland Gotham. And we'll talk about Gotham at the back end of the show, but 5 results that I will just read off for us from the weekend here. And I'm wondering if anything jumped out to you. We had Kansas City, Chicago, Red Stars 3-0 in that game. Scoreless draw between the Courage and the Spirit. Orlando 1-0 over Gotham. Houston 1-0 over Louisville. And then probably the one that I think that got talked about the most on the national level, at least, was Oil Reign topping Portland Thorns 2-1 at Lumen Field. You're laughing, so I'm wondering you're probably going in that direction.
Yeah, I think there's a couple ones that for sure. 27,000 plus at Lumen Field, massive, and then Just Fishlock and Megan Rapinoe calling themselves the most dramatic players in the league doing that win. So there's always some wildness, especially in that rivalry, which is always fun. And then I think the other one, which we can talk to Abby Erceg when we have her on next, but it's the 0-0 draw. I think that's massive, a good away point for North Carolina, but also I think at this point in time with coaching change, most recently for the Washington Spirit, getting a point at home, getting a young team, and against a potent attack for North Carolina that's really starting to look like they are going to mesh and come to life in typical North Carolina fashion towards the end of the season. So that was an impressive scoreline as well for me.
And we'll dive into a few of those games, as I mentioned. So if you have anything on that, folks, as you're watching here, shoot them our way, and we'll get to that at the back end of this. We'll hit on some news here early on, news of the day, I guess, at least today's news, plenty of it. Gotham with a new coach, NJNY Gotham FC. Scott Parkinson comes over after 4 years as an assistant in this league, first with Utah Royals and most recently with Chicago Red Stars. Bev Yanez, Beverly Goebel, is maybe some of you know if you've tuned out for a bit, but Bev Yanez is the first assistant coach joining him and a longtime player in this league. I think one of the, there's probably a lot of these players, Lori, but one of the maybe all-time kind of underrated or unsung type of players in this league. So cool to see that progression. She's actually in the B license course. That's sort of upcoming, I think would be the term, but.
Yeah, and I would just add too, not only underrated, but most respected as well. I think always a really well-liked player, especially amongst teammates. So awesome to see that. And no secret that I think that Scott Parkinson had been wanting to get a head coaching job. And I think this is a huge hire. I'm excited for this adventure for Gotham and what's next for them. And I think it comes at a timely time, I should say, because obviously been a little bit of a rough in terms of results for them in August, and we'll dive in more in that too. But in terms of just the results, so I think coming in, getting a couple coaches in place right away is important for the future for this club.
Yeah, we'll talk about that at the back end. And Gotham fans, you can shoot us a note on how you're feeling on the big news day. And then the other news from the weekend a couple days ago, Abby Dahlkemper joining Houston Dash, as we know, at least until the end of 2021. What do you think? What do you think about this? Still kind of parsing through exactly what to think of it, Lori?
Yeah, I'm still, you and I were talking off air too. It's just like trying to figure out exactly, what this means. But I think in the short term made sense and whereabouts with Abby and her husband that she wanted to be in Texas, right? This is the closest team. And then also Houston looking to create even more depth. And James Clarkson has spoken about Naughton and Oyster playing a ton of minutes. They do need to secure some more depth in that area. So for her to come in an important period where they got a big win this past weekend that was needed. And obviously Abby Dahlkemper has proven what she can do. But it'll be interesting because I think as it's been spoken about, but no one actually knows or hasn't been public about what all the full trade or loan is all about. We'll see. So there's always some exciting stuff happening.
TBD. We'll come back next week maybe. But we'll take a quick commercial break here, and we'll get Abby Erceg on in just a moment on NWSL Live. Shoot us those questions while we're at break. We'll be right back. Everybody, and welcome back to NWSL Live. Thank you for the questions, mainly for Abby, none for us yet, but that's all right, Lori. We're just going to get to.
Well, I got to see their faces again.
We're going to get to our guest here, Abby Erceg, defender for North Carolina Courage, and as well as the New Zealand national team. Bringing her in just a second, and going to talk a little bit of soccer, a little bit of everything. We got a few questions for her already, so excited to have Abby join us. And Abby, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Hi guys, happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you. So we want to talk, current events on the field, off the field. We got some fun questions. For you, we were talking about kind of the recent schedule here off air a little bit, and you're back from the Olympics. For the past couple of weeks. How are you feeling, and what's it been like, kind of getting back into a flow here in league play? Jumped right back in. I think you were right off the plane and into a match, weren't you?
Yeah, Paul likes to kind of get me back as fast as possible. As soon as my games are done, it's straight on a plane and back to North Carolina. But no, Olympic years and World Cup years are always tiring for players. There's a lot of rotation, there's a lot of filling in, there's a lot of travel. So players are tired coming in. So it's difficult for teams and for players to manage themselves. Fortunately, I've been lucky enough to go to a few of these events now. So it's a little bit like clockwork, which is really good for me. And so coming back, yes, I'm going to be a little bit tired, but I think, I've just got some routines down there. I'm able to recover a little bit. This year's just a little bit more challenging with COVID, obviously. There's some systems in place that make things a little bit more difficult. Travel is one of them. Even playing is a little bit more difficult. But I'm okay. A little tired as you're going to be, but, as good as you can be.
Yeah, I was going to ask that too, because even just like from covering the league and broadcast standpoint, we were saying like, this feels like a long year, right? And then like the Olympics should feel like ages ago at this point in time. So I was just curious if it feels different than past like World Cup or Olympic years that you've been involved in, which is kind of like the ebbs and flows of the season.
Yeah, definitely. I think because the season's been segmented a little bit. You had the really long preseason, and then you had the Challenge Cup, and then you had season, and then it was break for the Olympics, and then it's come back. So I feel like it seems so far away because you've just had these like segments throughout the year, which you don't often have. Sometimes it's broken up with international travel, but we haven't been fortunate enough to be able to have that this year. It feels like a long one this year. I think it's going to be like 10 months rolling through this time. So yeah, the 30-year-old body's starting to feel it a little bit.
Well, 30 sounds young. I'm like, wait a second.
Well, Lori was teasing this a little bit earlier, but she was talking about the courage. I guess Lori, you did say we wanted to ask Abby about the result on the weekend, and maybe we can wrap that into just courage are known to be dominant as is, but also kind of peak in that back half of the season, back third of the season, and that's obviously worked well in the past few years. Little bit of a different crew, some moving parts to the roster this year. How do you feel like this maybe compares to past years? Is it different in any way? And how are you feeling about kind of form at the moment?
Yeah, it's different. No, it's a COVID year, it's a pandemic here. It's going to be tough no matter what. And there's been a lot of rotation, obviously, with new teams coming in with Louisville, and then we've got 2 new teams next year. So there's a lot of movement on the roster, and there's a lot of new faces that we haven't really had before. We've had, especially with the Courage, we've had a lot of stability in our roster, which I think has helped to make us successful. So we've had a lot of players rotating in, and the way that we play is always the same. We have the same principles, the same culture that drives us forward, but the way that we play is, it seems simple, but it's really quite intricate. So for new players to pick that up, it's a lot of work, which I think is why we tend to peak at the end of season when the players have really nailed down the fundamentals. They've got the shape in the back of their minds. They know exactly what they're doing, and we kind of just go into autopilot at the end. But the start is figuring out the relationships, who's going to fit into which position, do they work there, do they not work there? Figuring that all out takes probably half the season, and then we kind of start rolling from that point. So I think you're starting to see that now with some of the results that we're getting. We're getting some clean sheets now. The backfill's obviously tying in together a little bit. The relationships are starting to form a little bit more strongly. And then same with the forward line, they're starting to score more goals. They're starting to find the back of the net. And I think that's typical of a Courage performance or a Courage season.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's always fun to hear that. I mean, I played with Paul before in our other pro league, and so I understand all those nuances that he brings and like the intricate style play. But it is fun to watch the team, right, grow, especially with how much the league is growing as well, bringing in 2 new teams next year and people in or franchises and clubs anticipating what's going to happen. So yeah, it feels like a ton of moving pieces this year. Do you feel like that changed your role at all though as a team? I mean, Paul's always talked very highly of you as a leader. Do you see yourself playing multiple roles this year in a different way, or no, has it stayed fairly the same?
Yeah, I think with Paul, he's challenging you psychologically, mentally, physically, tactically. You're always being challenged. He doesn't directly challenge me as a leader, and I think he just encourages me to find that out for myself. And especially with this year, with all the moving pieces that we've been talking about, you have to lead in different ways. So I found this year that I'm teaching a little bit more, and I'm just I'm encouraging a little bit more than I usually would. Usually it's everybody's business, everybody's focused, everybody knows what they're doing. There's a standard of play that everybody kind of just keeps to. But I think with so many new pieces, you have to, there's a little bit more leeway, and you just need to encourage people a little bit more rather than just like demand. It's just actually, you're doing okay, we'll get there, things will work out. Because for those players coming in, it's tough, it's difficult to play at that standard. If you haven't been at that standard before, it's really tough.
And trust us, it's not the same standard as what's going on in some other clubs. It's just not, right? It's just not.
I mean, on the field, I think that's what we've become known for, is the standard of play. And anytime we don't reach that standard, it's really frustrating as players. But I mean, again, with the pandemic, with all the players coming in and out with international travel in the Olympic year, you have to take that into consideration when you are leading a team. And there's a lot more stress involved in those years.
Yeah. Well, we've been talking about the stress a little bit. Was there something that jumped out to you on the fun side of the Olympics? I'm sure it wasn't the usual Olympic experience that you've gotten to have at other major tournaments, but were you able to kind of do something on the side of actually seeing a little bit of the country? Or?
Yeah, I've had a lot of these questions about how it was and what it was like, and it was more stressful. So usually you're stressing about the performance, but this time you were just stressing about being safe, which is quite a foreign thing when you're at this event, when there's just guards and there's gates and there's security everywhere. But it was for a different reason this time, and it was just making sure that everybody was being clean, and there was a lot of cleanliness and cleaning, and it was unusual to be at this event and wanting to perform at your best, yet you hadn't had a single game. I mean, New Zealand hadn't had a single game for 16 months. So we were worried about that, and we were worried about staying safe and not getting sick, because once you're there and somebody falls sick, that's it. It's over. It's not just like a player can come in and replace you. Your entire team is then isolating. So everybody was quite stringent in the processes that were in place and making sure that, you know, we were following those to a T. Yeah, it was stressful in a different way.
Yeah, I was really curious too, and I've spoken to a few of the US players about this, but the psychological aspect too. I think, you know, playing in a World Cup and Olympics, part of it is like been, you know, enjoying the atmosphere, enjoying the fans, getting out, right, to whatever you're comfortable with doing as an individual during those times. But with this, it sounded like everyone was on such lockdown that, like, that's the tough part, because if it is a poor performance, right, or if it's not the result you wanted, then you're just in your room for however many days in between, like soaking that in a way that's, like, I would say, quote unquote, not the healthiest for anybody, right? Because you're like mentally tough athletes. So yeah, it sounded like in the 16 months is wild, because we talked to Tom Sermani before, and I couldn't believe it. I thought that was brutal to be in that group, not
play. Yeah,
unfair.
We at least, I mean, we got the worst group and we just hadn't played a game, and we were just like, it just couldn't have felt like any worse for us. But, you know, it's just the way it was. You just had to, it was just one of those things, you just had to get on with it.
Yeah.
Well, shifting gears a little bit, one of the things I think that's been fun to watch you throughout your career is your fitness, the longevity of your career, taking care of yourself. You're precision nutrition certified. So can you just kind of talk about what that has been like throughout your career, and maybe has it always been like that, or was there a moment where you're like, okay, I need to start taking things a little bit more seriously in terms of like a holistic approach?
Yeah, there was a moment actually. I got traded from Chicago to Western New York, and I think I got quite comfortable in Chicago, and I wasn't taking it seriously. I think the league back then probably wasn't as serious anyway, and I don't think the demand was as high 6 years ago as it is now. I think the standard now is quite high, and so once you get traded, you kind of ask yourself a lot of questions, and there's a little bit of self-doubt, and there's you know, could I have done something different, or could I have done something better? And I think you kind of reflect a little bit. And one thing I reflected on was my fitness. I thought, well, you know, if teams are going to trade me, I want to at the very least, be as fit as I possibly can, as strong as I possibly can, so that it's just coming down to maybe my technical ability or something else rather than like this, and this. And I just felt like if I could work on that, it would just make things easier heading into a season. If I was fit and I was strong, I then only had to worry about one thing instead of 8 other things, and then trying to recover from preseason while also, trying to find my touch, while also trying to learn all the tactics. I think I was trying to simplify things as much as possible. And like you said, with Paul's trainings, it just, you need to just be focused on training. If you're focusing on anything else, you're going to kind of lose the drills that you're doing, and you'll fall behind a little bit. And obviously, the more fit I got, the more success I was finding. So the success on the field was encouraging me to be more fit off the field, and I was just kind of correlating those two together. Whether or not it was true, not sure, but it seemed to work for me. And I started to just really care for my body. So in the off season, I made sure to take a break, and then it was like, okay, I'm gonna get as strong, as fit, as fast as possible, and then go into season ready. Instead of using preseason to get ready, I was ready to go, and I could use preseason as the time to just find my touch again, and that was all I was really focusing on. And then when the games came, I was completely ready, and I could just, as soon as the whistle went, just go for the entire season. And I've just kind of carried that on from there. And as I'm getting a bit older, there's a bit more recovery involved and a bit less of the strength work. You kind of hit 30 and things take you a little bit longer, but it's the same thing. You're just becoming aware of your body in a different way and responding to what it needs now that I'm getting a little bit older.
We need like you to be doing live workouts for fans because we have questions, right? So like live weekly workouts, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I've actually written a few programs for some fans that are just like, I want to do some of your workouts, and I've seen you running, and I want to do this. I'm like, this is what I do. If you want to follow it, go ahead.
Nice.
And then there's radio silence. You don't hear from them again.
Yeah, right.
Nice. Well, we had, sorry if I butcher the screen name here, IRN Brugal. We shared with Abby here. Abby has the best Instagram. Every time I want to skip a workout, I look and think Abby would be disappointed. It sounds silly, but it's effective for me. Abby, I think your Instagram, if anybody flicks through your Instagram, I mean, especially in the off season, I mean, I imagine the pandemic made you like train even more, I'm guessing. Just a lack of games, that all sorts of workouts. You mentioned kind of the schedule and the recovery. I imagine it's less in season, right? But are you like, what's your in-season fitness regimen like? And are teammates, you mentioned fans, like, are you teammates coming to you like, hey, I got to build up my legs here, I got to build up something? like you get any pointers there?
I think the way that I train is quite unique. So when I tell people the way that I train and the things I do in the off season, they're quite surprised. The off season actually is the hardest part of my year in terms of training. So once season's finished, I usually take a 2-week break. I'll go and explore the country a little bit. I like exploring different states in America, just enjoying my time and being with friends or family at that time. And then once that's finished, I actually go straight back into the gym, and I just hammer myself basically for about 3 months, and just get as fit as I can. So that part of the year for me is actually the hardest. And I would say it's chronic training at that point. So that when I come into preseason, it's not hard. It's actually the opposite. So I'm actually decreasing the amount of work that I'm doing in season so that I can recover more quickly. And that seems to be the opposite to most people. Most people kind of take the off season off, have a break, and then come into preseason probably not as fit as they want to be, and they use that time to get fit. I like to use that time just to find my touch. I don't want to have to worry about recovering, because we do 2 sessions a day. To recover from that and to get better at the same time is difficult. So I want to be able to recover in time. And then when I get to the games, I'm not tired. I've just been working on my touch, and I've been able to cope with the training load that we have. And then during the season is when I do the least work. So I just go through what the team does. When I was a bit younger, when I was 26, 27, I would add in more lifting sessions. Again, as I'm getting older, those kind of decrease, and I just kind of do what my body needs. If I need an extra lifting session during the week, I might do that. But that's kind of decreased as I've gotten older, and I'll actually do more recovery sessions during season.
Mm-hmm. So we need you to not only train fans, but we also need you to write a book for all the young incoming players, so like how to prepare yourself for the longevity of a pro career. Great.
Well, I mean, that's kind of how it evolved on Instagram. People were like, what are you doing? How's it going? And I thought, well, why don't I just post about it? so people can see it, and I don't have to type different messages to people. They can all just kind of be in one area, and that's kind of how it developed, really.
Yeah.
So what's your, just briefly, I guess, go to favorite move, complex move or something? Maybe even if, say, somebody's doesn't have a ton of weights or equipment that you just do if you're on the road or something.
Oh, it's for sure some type of squat variation. A lot, especially women. I get a lot of women messaging me about how to train, and it's always the legs, it's always the butt area, it's always the hips. So like squats are just a really good thing to do. You can make it as hard as you want. Body weight is challenging for a lot of people, and you can always add, like, I think last year I was doing workouts with like backpacks and books and adding things like that people just have around the house. I like finding ways to reduce excuses for people, because not everybody can get to a gym, especially during the pandemic. It was just tough. Nobody wanted to be around anybody else. Gyms were closed. So I was just kind of being creative with what we had around the house. You can fill water bottles, you can fill buckets, you can, add books, whatever you could carry. I was kind of like, we can use that and make it difficult for people.
Is precision nutrition an added, was that just an extra element in terms of diving deeper into, for people that don't know, it's a certification, a nutrition certification, they're listening or watching. Was that just an added element to all of this for like a holistic approach, or was that something even when you started to kind of make that shift after the trade from Chicago that was rolled into it all?
I think it was, for me, I've always been interested in nutrition. So as I got more fit, obviously the nutrition side of it kind of tied in. And I've always been really, really interested in that side of fitness. So I actually knew all the information already. It was just kind of making it official. And I've done a couple of nutrition courses before, but I think for people online, I think it's reassuring when somebody has a certification and somebody knows what they're talking about. I think there are so many people online that are just kind of throwing out exercises and not really helping people. And they don't really know what they're talking about, because the fitness industry isn't, it's not like a registered master plumber. There's no same kind of guidelines for fitness. Just anybody can pick it up. So I think I just wanted to reassure people to say, actually, I do know what I'm talking about, and just get the certification so that people can see that.
For sure.
I like that. Well, Abby, we know you have to go shortly, so Lori, maybe we can get a couple of these fan questions in. I'm wondering, maybe we can roll in a couple of these together to a degree. PMC6601 was asking about potential, if New Zealand gets a W League team, would you consider playing? And there was another question from Duffy Nutt. What about the next New Zealand coach? So either of those to you, but maybe just, I know you've been outspoken in the past about wanting to see, further investment development in New Zealand from a national team, a club perspective, all over. So what do you think? I mean, kind of big picture, future of New Zealand that you want to see for the future generation?
Yeah, I think definitely want a league in New Zealand. I think all the best teams in the world, you look at Germany, France, America, they all have their own leagues. So I think the next progression for New Zealand, if we want to get better and want to keep up, is to have our own league eventually. Obviously, that's not going to go straight to a professional league. We'll start amateur and then semi-pro and pro, hopefully. At the moment, we don't have the resources to be able to do that. So I think tying into a league that already exists that's close, like the W League in Australia, makes sense for us. And we can kind of work off their resources and not have to tie in as much. I think that's probably a good starting point for New Zealand. And I would have been interested in that probably 3 or 4 years ago when the season was maybe a little bit more short. Obviously, with the longer season with the NWSL, that makes it a little bit more difficult. So I'm kind of at the point in my career where I want to get the most out of it that I can. And obviously, being a little bit older, the recovery time in between seasons isn't going to exist if I'm going from one to the other. So I think for now, I'll probably prioritize NWSL. And if there was an opportunity to play maybe a little bit later, I might look at it. I'd love to be able to help some of the younger players coming through. I think I have a lot of experience that I could kind of pass off to them. And if I could do that while I'm still playing, I think that'd be really, really beneficial. But I think for now, I'm pretty happy at North Carolina. I like it here.
And what about coaching wise? What's kind of like the next step? Do you feel like, obviously Tom Sermanni's stepped down and moving on or retiring? So what would you like to see from that?
Yeah, it's tough. Tom was a great coach. We've had, just a string of great coaches, bar the one before Tom. We've had a string of great coaches, and they've done really well with us. So I think, in regards to who that could be, I don't know. At the moment, it could be anyone really. I think with New Zealand hosting the next World Cup, it's a prime time to pick up the team, because there's going to be a lot of the limelight on our team. And typically we tend to do better than expected at World Cups. We don't quite get the results that we need to go through, but we still are doing better than we are expected to with the resources that we're given. So we just need somebody that understands that and is not coming and expecting all these resources to be thrown at us and going to get this and this. They're going to have to be resourceful themselves. And a coach with a lot of experience, I think, is the only way to go about that. I think if you're throwing somebody new, and it's going to be really difficult for them to understand, not only with the short time frame that they're going to have building up to the World Cup, understand that, but also understand that actually we're not the same as America, we're not the same as Canada or France. We don't have these resources. How can you get the best out of our players without all of that in there?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 2023 around the corner, so I'm sure.
Yeah, it's only a couple of years, so I have to hang on to that one.
Well, before we let you go, I want to ask you quick, Abby. You mentioned travel in the off season. You like to check out the different states. I think you were in New Zealand at some point last year. Obviously, you have plenty, but we love to talk travel on this show. So, what's a place that really blew you away for sightseeing, tourists, whatever it was?
Oh, in America, it was for sure. I did like the loop around Colorado, Arizona, Utah, like kind of that little loop around there. And it was just like the coolest thing I've ever done. And we did like all the national parks around there and just like Moab, and just, it was so cool to it's kind of like different countries for me. So you go to like this arid, dry, and you've got the Rockies, and you're going through Colorado. It was really cool to be able to experience all of that in a space of 2 weeks and be in the same country. We don't really have that in New Zealand. It's kind of the same. So that area for me was just like phenomenal. It was cool. It was really, really cool. Yeah.
Nice. We missed Jordan this week, but we got the Colorado shout out.
I know.
We got some fun fan questions. Sorry we couldn't get to them all, but we want to respect Abby's time here. And Abby, thank you for joining us on NWSL Live, and good luck in the home stretch of the season here.
Awesome. Thank you for having me, guys. Loved it.
Thanks.
We'll be right back to talk about the weekend's games. Lori and I. Stay with us. What's up, everybody? Back here for the final segment of NWSL Live. Thank you to Abby Erceg for a fun chat, as always, talking New Zealand courage, and thank you for your questions. Hopefully we got a few in, couldn't get all of them, but appreciate that, and appreciate Abby joining us. We talked about one of those results from the weekend, the 0-0 draw that featured her courage team, Courage and Spirit, but a few other games we really want to highlight, and we want to start with one that Lori mentioned up at the top. Rain Thorns at Lumen Field, a NWSL record crowd, a doubleheader, obviously not a standalone, but still a record crowd, and a fun game. I thought we've talked about kind of the Rain of old before on the show. I don't know if this was the Rain of old per se, Lori, but we had the Jess Fishlock, Megan Rapinoe connection as we see the opening goal, which was quite nice, a good team build-up. Rapinoe again from the spot, and I thought it was fitting that finally 8 years later we see this team on this stage at the stadium, and it's a couple of Rain OGs combining for that goal.
I think that they found it fitting as well. I mean, they were outspoken about wanting to play here more often and hope that comes about. And you talk about the OGs, Laura Harvey rejoining. Yeah. I mean, I think this is the difference. We've all been waiting when Lisa Mayer, Buhati, Marjan all came, right? In knowing that Megan Rapinoe would be coming back, it was just a matter of time. And now we're starting to see kind of the old ways, as you even mentioned, just the excitement, the energy that this team played for. I mean, that's why they were so successful. Not only were they a ton of talent on the field, but played with so much energy, and you just felt like the team got along. I feel like you're starting to see that again. And listen, this is one of the best rivalries in women's soccer globally. It is such a fun competition every time. And this is 2 games that the Rain have won now against Portland this season. So I don't think that the Thorns will be too happy about that, but always fun. So exciting to see. And I think that's the difference, right? These teams are playing, they're starting to click, and Laura Harvey's going to come in, bring some structure, knows the team, knows the players well, and we'll get them hype. And now I think big turnaround coming up tomorrow night against Houston, having to travel. We'll see what that looks like, right? Because that's an important game.
Yeah, 2-1 win for the Rain there over the Thorns. Thorns still top of the table. I think obviously we have to mention a really compact schedule for them.
Yep.
ICC and some travel and some midweek games. So I think, to some degree you can chalk that up to just having to play a crazy schedule and being in Seattle on a Sunday night that the Rain were obviously up for the occasion. But don't look now, Rain sitting in 3rd, and as you mentioned, playing on the midweek here on Wednesday. So
yeah. You made it. That's a good shout, though, Jeff, because I think that was their 5th game in 2 weeks for the Thorns, and it was just a matter of time, right? They're playing consistently, they're doing well, and it's still keeping this game tight, right? They pulled it back, won back in the first half. So, credit to them how good they have been all year.
Yeah. So we'll keep an eye on the Rain as they climb the table, and at the other couple other games we want to talk about here. First, I was talking about a team build-up goal, Houston-Louisville. This was a 1-0 result for the Dash, but I thought a great team goal here, an important 3 points for the Dash here. They lost this away fixture previously to that Ebony Salmon goal in her debut. And Houston, we talked about the Dahlkemper trade a little bit. I guess I wonder if that maybe addresses a need. You talked about depth a little bit, but let me ask you big picture here briefly, Lori, where are the Dash for you in the playoff push? What do they need, and where do you think they're at? Because they're still below the red line right now.
Yeah, well, I think really they need healthy players, they need some depth, and they need consistency, because I think that's the thing that's been missing. They dropped some points early on in a critical part of the season, and we keep saying that. I think at the beginning we're like, oh, this is a critical part to get points before the national team players go away, right, for the Olympics. And then it was like during the Olympics, this is a critical time. And I think that they dropped some uncharacteristically over the last year and a half in some of those areas. They dropped some points when they know they shouldn't have, and so now they're having to climb their way out. But I think getting Nichelle Prince back, I think she's consistently been a player that has done really well and doesn't get all the love that she deserves, and now even more confident after how she played at the Olympics and then winning the gold medal. Her run to get on the end of this ball to initiate that pass, but then also the pass that she played in for Daly to be able to hit it first time is exceptional. So adding some of these dimensions back, Alicia Chapman, Groom having players around them, Daly now back after a few games, that is only going to help. And then you add in the Dahlkemper and allowing for some more depth in that position and rotation potentially, because that's been the major issue, is leaking goals unnecessarily. You start to add in some depth there. You can start to move players around that can help.
Yeah, I've been talking about the Dash as a team that I like for a late playoff push. I still think the talent, the ability, and even some of that cohesion is there when everybody's there to the point. And we certainly saw that on the weekend. And there's been, obviously the Olympic period there where that wasn't necessarily the case, but home stretch here, we'll see where Houston nets out. It's still the tight table. We talk about it every week, but by the time we talk to you all next week, I'm sure many things will be flipped yet again. So I mentioned the Dash are below the red line, but we'll see how things go. About 24 hours from now, we'll see them again. So third game of the weekend that we want to talk about and highlight, and the last one that we'll highlight in some depth here, Orlando with, I think, a really critical 3 points on the road, a 1-0 victory over Gotham at Red Bull Arena. We talked a little bit about Gotham. I want to briefly talk about both sides here because we can start with you look at this goal from Erica Timrack. I'm going to say, I don't know if she was asked about this post-game. This was not a Schross. She takes a look up, sees goalkeeper positioning. This one was intentional. I think a very good goal from Erica Timrack. But Lori, Gotham, you talked about a little bit. 6 without a win now. They went all through August. 3 straight losses. Obviously, the manager change, I think you have to say, had some effect as that became, an element that they were dealing with in August there. We talked about that. Where does Gotham go from here? 1-0 loss at home. What are you looking for? We talked about the coaching, but what are you looking for from the team itself to kind of get them on track?
Yeah, there's no doubt that all of these things have taken its toll. Such fine margins regardless of the standings in this league. So things are so tight. And then this is why Erica Timrack shown up big for Orlando and scoring that goal. But for Gotham, I think it really is about getting Scott Parkinson, Bev Yanez, Goebel there and ready to take over, right? And kind of just reignite the team, because you can still see they're playing good soccer. They have a lot of pieces that can help them in a lot of different ways. They have the ability to rotate their roster if necessary. And we even talked about this a lot at the beginning of the year, their ability to be able to play direct when needed, but also be able to keep possession. So they have a variety in their style of play. It's just about getting back to that. And I think they've had a tough road stretch, right? They played, it's always going to be tough to play Portland at home midweek, have to turn around and come in. And Orlando's a team that would be coming off of a loss against Washington in the last minutes. They'd be fired up under their new coach, Becky Burley. So I think it's also about just regrouping, realizing where they are and noticing okay, listen, we had a tough stretch, but we're very much in these games and we just need to clean up a few things. And they're right back in the mix. So I think it's just about taking a deep breath and regrouping really for this squad. Yeah,
Becky Burley 2-1-2 now as interim coach. I think you could say things going pretty well in Orlando, certainly from where they were at the point at which she took over, when Pride at one point top of the table there in the spring hit a real rough patch like the one we're talking about with Gotham. I think both of these teams that we're talking about now were Gotham in the Challenge Cup final this year. Both teams kind of hitting all cylinders early, and now trying to find their feet, maybe a little bit of regression to the mean. But Orlando has done that, so we'll see if Gotham can do the same in a coaching change, which is a more permanent one in their case, no interim tag there. So big result for the Pride. We mentioned big result for the Dash, and we did mention the one midweek game. If you're looking for some midweek action, it's Reign versus Dash tomorrow, Wednesday night. And I think like many of these games, there aren't many games at this point. We're hours away from September, Lori, that are not big games at this point with the home stretch.
Another critical part in the season, right? Because there hasn't been much shit. There's 6 teams in the middle have just been shifting back and forth and taking points off one another. So I do think this is a Dash must win. I think we talk about fine margins. This is when you're at, regardless of where they are in the standings, you've got to win your home games, and then they have to turn around and play Orlando away this coming Sunday. So tight stretch for them as well. Must win at home. Yeah,
I genuinely absolutely hate cliches, but the way this season has played out, the table, the funky results, it has been difficult to avoid some of these things, whatever it is, must win games, tight table. It's been reality.
And it's not just chaos after dark, it's just chaos.
Just chaos, period. Chaos 24/7. That will define my days. All right, we couldn't get to all your questions. We'll try to get to some of these next week. I think they'll be timely. at that point as well. But Dude Mom had a couple of them, and Dude Mom 16 says, hair on point tonight, Lori, kapow. So
thanks.
We'll
Kapow,
end
right
it
back to you, Mom.
with that one. Thank you for joining us on NWSL Live. As always, as I said, we'll get to some of your questions. Keep them coming each week. You can send them to us on Twitter or wherever in between shows. And we'll be back with you every Tuesday, 5 p.m. Eastern. Thanks for joining us. And looking forward to talking to you again with another great guest next week. For Lori, thank you, Lori. Thank you, Abby Erceg. I'm Jeff, and we'll see you again soon.